Ghosts are frightening no matter where you see them, which is usually in a haunted house, but it's not always the case. Join us as we have a look at 10 of the creepiest ghost sightings on public transit. The ghost dog. A dog in the subway station can be a fairly rare thing, but it isn't impossible. In fact, if you ride the metro, you're probably going to be accustomed to seeing a variety of pets and their owners. Now, if you don't own a car, it may be the only way that you can get your pet to the vet. Sometimes you may even see the ghost of President Franklin Delano Roosevelt's dog. That's right. Some people report to routinely see FDR's dog, and eyewitness reports have stated that they often see the trusted Scottish Terrier lingering around on the platform, often in the same place where he used to wait with his owner in order to catch a ride from Grand Central Station to the Waldorf Astoria Hotel. Now, in addition to these reports, others have also claimed to see the dog in other locations, which include Washington Square Park. The Phantom Train. Does anyone remember that one train from Ghostbusters? Well, what if I told you that that train may have actually been spotted by some very frightened and terrified travelers? It does seem a little crazy, but multiple people have actually reported seeing a ghost train that's similar to the one in the Ghostbusters series. Looking very timely and beautiful, many witnesses claim that it's from 1904. They also say that they spotted the Phantom Train at Astor Place, and at least one rider even reported having boarded it. Now, if the lore is actually true, the apparent spectral train belongs to August Belmont Jr. Belmont's company built the Lexington Avenue line that would first open in October of 1904. It's also well known that Belmont maintained his own private car, which he used to entertain guests, and it would also carry him to the racetrack that was named after him in Queens. The car is said to have been lavishly decorated, featuring leatherette curtains, a reclining couch, mahogany and silk drapes, and it even featured a stove. You know, just in case you got hungry or wanted to roast some chestnuts while going down the rails. The Ghost of Grandpa. Losing a loved one can be a painful and downright depressing and traumatic experience, but what if you had the fortune of being able to see them again after death without having to meet them in the afterlife? Well, apparently that's exactly what happens to a 6-year-old boy by the name of Nasir Malave. According to his father Fred, Nasir performs in the subway as a breakdancer and often reports having seen his grandfather milling about. Except his grandfather's dead. Fred claims that his son is much like that kid in The Sixth Sense, that he is able to see spiritual things and can describe his grandfather with pinpoint accuracy despite never having actually met the man face to face. Fred simply believes that this departed dad is watching over Nasir as he breakdances in the subway, making sure that he remains safe. It all does make for a very touching and even bittersweet scenario, because although it was hard for Fred to remember that his father was dead, it still gives him great comfort to believe that Grandpa is actively watching over his son. The Ghost on the California Bus. One boy by the name of Marcus would get on the bus, and that's when his friend told him the story of a girl who had been shot by a KKK member and had sat in the very seat that he was in. The next day, much to his grim surprise, he ended up seeing the girl. He recounted the events, remarking that the next day when he went to go home on the bus, he thought that he had seen a little girl laying in the seat who'd been shot. And in addition to that, she was also mumbling his name. Marcus told the incident to his mother, who then had a discussion with the bus driver, but he claimed that the boy was probably just making it up and imagining the whole thing. The mother chalked it up to grandiose imagination and simply let it go. However, the sightings would continue, and Marcus would go on to further report having seen the girl the next morning. When he boarded the bus, he glanced out of the window, and then he saw the same little girl holding a gun, mumbling a word. After that, of course, Marcus would refuse to ride the bus, and really, who can blame him? The Beijing Ghost Bus. Taking the bus is a normal everyday thing, but taking the bus in China isn't really much different from anywhere else in the world, except when it involves the unexpected. Passengers in Beijing would get the shock of a lifetime after encountering some men who looked as though they didn't belong. As the story goes, witnesses recounted that the men's faces were much wider than a normal person's face, and they didn't seem to acknowledge anyone else on the bus. As the bus would go along its route, it began to empty of its passengers until only an old lady and a young man would remain inside, with two pale, strange mystery men. All was quiet and like any other ride. That was until an abrupt argument between the old lady and a young man who remained inside when she claimed that he tried to steal her wallet. The quarrel would be resolved when the old lady insisted that the men get off the bus and go to the nearest police station. After the incident, it was reported that the bus had disappeared, turning up 3 days later in a reservoir with 3 heavily decomposed bodies inside. Later reports would also go on to claim that the gas tank had been filled with blood instead of fuel. The disappearing girl. Now, it's a common old age ghost story. A guy picks up a girl who's stranded along the roadside, and when he gets to her house, she's mysteriously gone. But what if it actually happened? One bus driver would swear up and down that it actually did happen to him. While on his way back to the garage for the night, he noticed a young lady at a bus stop trying to flag him down. It was late and the driver felt some compassion because the young college-aged looking girl was in distress. And so he decided to pick her up, asking if she was going his way, to which she agreed. Once arriving at the destination, however, he opened the doors and waited for her to get off the bus, which she never did. Being so late, he simply thought that she must have fallen asleep and walked up and down the aisles to wake her. Except that even with a slow and meticulous search, the girl could not be found. As it turns out, apparently years earlier in that same exact spot, a young girl had walked out in front of traffic after having a fight with her boyfriend and was killed on the spot. The girl who the driver picked up is said to have matched the description of the girl who was killed. The ghost train of Stockholm Metro. In the 1960s, most trains were painted green in Stockholm, all except for one, that is. The Silver Arrow was an unpainted train. And as rumor has it, if you ever did hop on the Silver Arrow, you would never depart from it. As it turns out, in the early part of the decade, the metro system was expanded upon, and that resulted in the opening of a brand new blue line halfway through 1975. That's when the Kimling station was built to service an area that was slated for economic redevelopment. Unfortunately, the development never came to be, and consequently, it killed the expected demand for the station, so the structure never opened to passengers. Of course, abandoned places tend to gather urban legends, and like another station, Kimling was blank and unadorned on the inside without ads or signs, making it look pretty ghostly in contrast to the other bustling stations along the metro line. Even today, residents believe that the ghost train of the Silver Arrow still somehow operates on the Blue Line, and that the dead are content to board and depart from the station. The Phantom Bus. London is a city that's famous for its red double-decker buses, something that most of us Westerners don't have. However, buses are ripe with accidents and paranormal activity, as many motorists have found out. As the story goes, it would be in 1934 when a motorist was making their way along Cambridge Gardens, and then out of the blue would swerve and be killed when they hit a wall and became engulfed in flames. After this incident, witnesses would come forward claiming that they had seen an apparent ghost bus at the time of the man's crash, and that it usually appeared around the same time every morning at about 1:15 a.m., which ironically is the same time that the crash happened to the man. No driver was ever reported to be visible on the bus, and the bus never featured any kind of lighting. Motorists would become convinced that they were about to go head-on with the large bus and then would swerve to avoid colliding with it, only to look back and see that there was actually nothing there. The ghost of the train victim. Train crashes are a devastating and catastrophic event in most cases, and usually no one gets out without being hurt. Derailment can even end up being worse because it forces the whole train off the tracks, which causes more damage to the train as well as the surrounding area. So with all that, it's safe to say that train conductors can witness some pretty gruesome, strange, and downright odd things in their careers. One such man would have the scare of a lifetime after a derailment in which he encountered a man walking away from it. The derailment itself had been caused when the train smashed into a truck trying to cross the tracks. The same man that the conductor had seen walking along the road was the same man who was dead and behind the wheel of the crashed truck. The arm. Now, if you were forced to see a ghost at some point in your life, I would think that most of us would prefer to see the whole thing. One unlucky man would encounter a certain apparition and got a lot less than he wanted. In 1907, a man was going through the old section of London when he was passing a relic, and that's when he encountered an outstretched arm with a hand at the end and nothing else. He then became terrified to the point of jumping into the road, and when he glanced back, he noticed a man in dark clothing who seemingly walked right through a wall. What makes it even more terrifying is that the witness reported he heard no sounds, no footsteps, no breathing, no anything. The next morning, he would go back to the same spot where he encountered the ghost and found no traces of anything having ever happened. Many witnesses would report hearing the unidentified flying object long before they could even see it. Residents of the town said that they began hearing loud sounds that resembled rushing winds from above. And it would not be long after that people began to notice a 747 jet-sized object flying over the city. Its most distinctive feature being 6 lights